a large-scale money laundering operation spanning southern Africa and the Middle East. The Al Jazeera investigative unit has uncovered evidence implicating high-ranking diplomats in Zimbabwe and some of South Africa's top banks. The FBI and DEA are currently standing on top of $13 trillion in gold after a massive raid exposed a global cartel. This is a story about money laundering on a scale that makes every other heist in history look like a joke. Yeah, about that. And get this, the gold itself came from a place that should not even exist. The grit and grime of the mining world are finally being washed away to reveal the truth underneath the surface. So, here is the deal. You are about to see how nature and crime collided in the biggest way. Federal strike on biggest gold pile. More gold has come out of one stretch of ancient rock in South Africa than from any other place on Earth by a ridiculous margin. Since mining began in 1886, the area known as the Witwatersrand has given us around 52,900 tons of gold. That is roughly 40% of all the gold ever mined in human history. At today's prices, that pile of metal would be worth about $13 trillion. That is enough money to buy every major gold field in America many times over. Yet, the strangest thing about this legendary place is that its riches were not locked in glittering veins deep in the ground. Instead, they were found in old river gravels that later turned into solid stone. This is a key detail because it means the gold was moved by water before it was ever mined by people. The FBI and DIA are looking into how these massive amounts of wealth have been moved around because it is hands down the biggest target for money laundering on the planet. Nobody expected this to happen, but the FBI by Andia just had to step in. The cartel running these operations has been using the sheer volume of gold to hide their tracks. When you have $13 trillion sitting in one spot, it is easy to lose a few billion here and there. But here is the catch. The FBI has been tracking the paper trail for years. They realized that the gold being pulled out of the ground was not just being used for jewelry or bank vaults. It was being used to fuel a global network of crime. What most people do not realize is that the geology of this place makes it the perfect cover. The gold is spread out across such a huge area that it is hard to keep track of every single ounce. For over 100 years, people have been digging deeper and deeper into the earth to find this treasure. Some of the mines go down more than 2 miles. That is a long way down into the dark and hot parts of the earth. The workers down there are blasting solid rock to get to the gold. It is not like the old days of panning for gold in a stream with a little metal dish. This is industrial scale work that requires massive machines and thousands of people. The crazy part is that all of this effort is for tiny grains of gold that you can barely see with your eyes. You have to crush tons of rock just to get a few grams of the yellow metal. And that is putting it lightly because the scale of the operations is just massive. The cartel has been controlling the flow of this gold to manipulate prices and hide their dirty money from the FBI. But now that the FBI and DIA have stormed the area, the truth is coming out. They are finding secret ledgers and hidden vaults that show exactly how the money was being laundered. This raid is basically the end of an era for the mining cartel. They thought they were untouchable because they were so far away and had so much power. But the FBI does not care about how deep the mine is or how much gold you have. They only care about the law. The cartel thought they could hide their tracks in the deep, dark tunnels under the earth forever. Liquid gold from old streams. If you could somehow rewind the planet by nearly 3 billion years, the landscape would look nothing like it does today. Instead, you have to imagine a world of wide rivers snaking across an ancient continent called the Cap Val Craton. This is one of the oldest pieces of Earth crust still around. These rivers were not flowing over forests or grass because none of that existed yet. They were flowing across barren ground made of ancient rocks called greenstone belts. These greenstones are very old and they often contain tiny traces of gold. Those rivers were basically nature concentration machines. As water rushed over the land, it picked up sand and pebbles and heavy minerals. Gold is very dense and it does not rust or break down easily. Because of this, it tended to settle out in spots where the water slowed down just a little bit. This happened at bends in the channels or where the river hit a gravel bar. Over millions of years, layer after layer of this material built up. The most important layers became what miners later called reefs. But here is the twist. In most gold fields, a reef means a crack in the rock filled with gold. In this place, a reef is something completely different.
It is mostly conglomerate, which is just a fancy word for ancient gravel that turned into rock. Think of it as nature concrete made of rounded pebbles glued together. This is a key detail that many can confirm because it explains why the gold is so spread out. Instead of being in one narrow vein, it is found in wide layers that go on for miles. That is why entire mining districts could follow the same rock layers underground for a very long time. It made the cartel very rich because they knew exactly where the gold would be. But those gravels did not stay loose forever. Over a long time, they were buried under more sand and mud. They were squeezed by massive forces from the earth and heated up deep in the crust. This changed the original river sediments into hard rock. So, from the very beginning, this place was unusual. Instead of tiny veins that are hard to find, the gold was everywhere in the sediment. For starters, that meant you could plan a huge mine and know it would last for decades. This gave the cartel the stability they needed to build their money laundering empire. They could predict exactly how much gold they would get every month. But here is the deal. The fee started to notice that the numbers were not adding up. The amount of gold being reported did not match the amount of money flowing through the cartel bank accounts. It is not that simple though, because the cartel used complex geological reports to confuse the investigators. They would claim the gold was in one place when it was actually in another. They would use the weird nature of the rock to hide their secret shipments. But the FBI brought in their own geologists to map the area. They realized that the gold was not just being found. It was being moved in secret. The ancient rivers created a path for the gold, but modern criminals used it for a darker purpose. Deep crust, chemical miracles. As the basin was buried, it did not just sit there quietly. It was squeezed by tectonic forces which created large cracks and faults. These structures were like a plumbing system for hot fluids moving through the rock. At the same time, the heat deep in the earth caused minerals to break down and release water and gases. These fluids likely picked up even more dissolved gold from the surrounding rocks. Once inside the basin, the fluids followed the path of least resistance. They moved along the same layers where the gold was already sitting from the old rivers. When these hot fluids hit layers rich in carbon or iron, a chemical reaction happened. This caused even more gold to drop out of the liquid and stick to the rock. So, what you end up with is a hybrid system. First, the rivers laid down the gold and then the hot fluids added even more. This combination is what makes the area so staggeringly rich. Nature did not just concentrate the gold once. It did it multiple times. This is a key detail because it explains why there is more gold here than anywhere else. The cartel knew about this plumbing system and they used it to their advantage. They targeted the high-grade spots where the fluids had concentrated the gold the most. The crazy part is that these fluids also helped to hide the gold from normal scanners. It was locked away in tiny fractures that only expert geologists could find. But the DIA has been using advanced technology to track the chemical signatures of the gold. They can tell exactly which mine a piece of gold came from just by looking at the tiny impurities inside it. This allowed them to trace the laundered gold back to the cartel's secret operations. See, it is not that simple, though. Because the cartel had their own labs to try and change the signature of the metal. They were trying to make it look like the gold was coming from legal sources in other countries. But the DIA was one step ahead. They realized that the metamorphic fluids had left a unique mark on the gold that could not be faked. This was the breakthrough the FBI needed to launch their raid. They could finally prove that the gold being sold on the global market was actually part of a criminal enterprise. The cartel was using the heat and pressure of the earth to forge their wealth. But the FBI used science to bring them down. It is a story of how the very chemistry of our planet can reveal the truth if you know where to look. The cartel thought they were smart, but they forgot that the earth keeps a record of everything that happens inside it. Nature worked for billions of years to hide this treasure, but a few greedy men almost ruined it. Giant impact preserving treasure. Around 2 billion years ago, a massive asteroid slammed into the region. This created what we now call the Witwatersrand Dome, which is the largest impact site on Earth. The collision was so big that it sent shock waves through the crust and shattered the rocks for miles. This asteroid did not bring the gold with it because the gold was already there, but the impact did change things in a big way. It caused intense heat and created even more cracks in the ground. This allowed fluids to move around again and concentrate the gold even more in some spots. More importantly, the impact helped to protect the gold from being washed away by erosion. It pushed the gold-bearing layers deep into the earth where they were safe from the wind and rain for millions of years. This is a key detail that most people do not realize. Without that asteroid, we might not have any gold left to find in South Africa. The cartel used the Veer Dome as a natural fortress. The terrain is very rugged and hard to navigate, which made it easy for them to hide their illegal mining sites. They thought the ghost of the ancient asteroid would protect them from the law. But the FBI used satellite imagery to look through the dust and the rocks. They saw the movement of trucks and equipment in areas that were supposed to be empty. They realized that the cartel was using the geological complexity of the impact site to mask their activities. The crazy part is that the asteroid impact made the rock so hard that it is very difficult to mine. You need special drills and high explosives to get through it. This meant that only a group with a lot of money and power could run a mine there. This was another clue for the FBI. They followed the money to see who was buying all that expensive mining equipment. It led them straight to the heads of the cartel. So, here is the deal. The asteroid that almost destroyed the area actually ended up saving the gold for the cartel to find. And now that gold has led the FBI right to their door. It is a perfect circle of events that spans billions of years. This gold has seen it all. The FBI and DIA are now in control of the sites. And they are making sure that the $13 trillion in gold is used legally. They have dismantled the cartel and are working to clean up the money laundering networks. It is a massive job, but they are making progress every day. The world is watching to see what happens next with all that wealth. Now that the FBI has uncovered the secrets of the $13 trillion gold field, we have to wonder if there are more cartels hiding in plain sight. Could other massive resources be fueling hidden crimes? This is a key detail we cannot ignore. Make sure to like and subscribe for more breaking news. What do you think is the next big secret the FBI will find?